Welcome to Excite Energy by HMS Networks. Let's have a look at the Modbus TCP and RTU configuration of the SG gateway. The SG gateway simultaneously supports a Modbus TCP server or a Modbus RTU slave, as well as a total of up to 128 Modbus TCP clients and Modbus RTU masters. Note that only one serial port is available. Therefore, slave and master cannot be configured at the same time. To configure one server or slave, select the mode. For Modbus TCP mode, the server IP corresponds to the IP settings of the SG gateway. The TCP port can be changed. TCP keep alive mechanism usually should stay enabled with default settings to prevent clients from disconnecting. For RTU mode, you define a server address, choose between RS-232 with optional flow control and RS-485 and select baud rate and parity. Now you can start to add your data points above. For further details, please see the integrated help section. Good to know, as basic knowledge, is that the SG gateway uses a local point of view when it comes to inputs and outputs. So an input data point receives data and an output data point is sending data. If you want to change this into a global point of view, please feel free to name the data points your way. A Modbus function always includes a specific data type and communication direction and is short-named with a hex code. Please keep in mind the name of a function is based on the client's master's action. You're not sure which function works for you? Since Modbus functions are handled quite different in the field, please have a look into your end device's manual to figure out its specific expectations. A Modbus server slave is passive. The client master can write to it or query an address. One address can contain data types of 1 to 16 bits, so bigger data types occupy as much addresses as divided by 16. Which has to be entered in the field quantity. This field can also be used to configure a data point array. This can be mapped one-to-one onto another protocol very easy in a later step, if available as array with the same structure there as well. The configured start address is the first address which will be incremented automatically. So just for example, to configure two data points of 64 bits in one step, at start address 4, you would have to enter the quantity of 8, because 8 times 16 bits of memory are needed. The next free address above would then be 12. Modbus data transmissions are all handled by cyclical polling from client's master's side. Interval time defines the interval until the next transmission starts, as well as the minimum collecting time before all data is forwarded to the PLC. If it's too low, several cycles are needed until all data are received and forwarded to the PLC all together. The event log will show violated message if this occurs. It informs you not to expect the data inside the PLC to be updated in each configured cycle. If it's too high, you lose time between the transmissions. The meaning of timeout is different for RTU and TCP. TCP clients send requests parallel, so each request timeout counter starts relatively early at the start of the cycle. Each value's request has its own timeout. Use the expected worst round-trip time as timeout. It might need to be increased furthermore based on the network topology and the server response time. RTU masters send requests sequentially, so each request timeout starts after the previous request has finished or had a timeout itself. So the timeout must be high enough to transfer the biggest request of data, but not too high to avoid losing time if a request fails. Please keep in mind that transferring arrays takes longer and gets handled with the same timeout. So if you have a mix of some arrays and many single data points for optimized performance, you might prefer to split the arrays. To configure a Modbus master, you must enable RTU below first and configure it. To do so, the single serial connector must be free to use. Next, please click the button Add Device to add a new device, name it, and choose TCP or RTU if enabled. For TCP, enter the server's IP and port you want to connect to. For RTU, the only COM port interface is selected by default, so only its address has to be entered. Then you select your device and click the Add Value button to add a data point and name it. If your server is located behind a concentrator or gateway with several devices, you need to enter its unit identifier. Apart from that, the unit identifier might not matter. Note that since the SG-gateways TCP server mode does not support multi-slave, the unit ID is not evaluated there. A Modbus function always includes a specific data type and communication direction and is short-named with a hex code. Since Modbus functions are handled quite different in the field, please have a look into your end device's manual to see its specific expectations. If the words are located in wrong position, the Swap Words option can be activated for swapping the double word payload data. To connect to SG-gateways Modbus server slaves data point, simply configure the function with the same hex code. A client master is active, pushes outputs and pulls inputs, and can therefore configure the same address several times with the same function in order to query a storage space in the server several times for different input data points. However, pushing several outputs in parallel onto a storage space in the server overrides its contents, which is why this only makes sense in special cases. Finally, save your settings and reboot your device as usual. By the way, a received Modbus input value in the PLC editor's diagram view is stamped with UTC system time. Servers are configured to 0000 by default and can therefore be reached via all TCP/IP interfaces. If a certain interface is required, the firewall must be activated to whitelist the server port for the desired IP range. This means that the assignment to a specific interface can be made via the IP range. Good. Thanks for watching. You are very welcome to watch out for more videos.